Welcome back to the Basic Radio User Training Program hosted by the Hot Cog Homeland Security Division. We've covered a lot of ground so far and we're nearing the end of the course. In this unit, we will dig a bit deeper into how interoperable channels should be programmed in our radios and utilized during our incident and event responses. We will also take a look at some great resources that can help us make better use of the interoperability channels that we have at our disposal. The Texas Statewide Interoperable Channel Plan and the MOU included within the document outline the programming requirements for interoperability channels across the state. If you remember from Unit 2, all agencies and jurisdictions must execute the MOU between the Texas Department of Public Safety and their own agency or jurisdiction in order to lawfully use the interoperable channels. You can access the TSICP and MOU on the Texas Statewide Communications Interoperability Coordinator, or SWIC's, website using the link below. The TSICP outlines how the interoperability channels should be programmed into radios throughout the state of Texas. The reasoning for this standardization is to ensure that any responder in the state, when faced with the need to communicate with any other responder, and having equipment operating within the same band, have common channels in which they can communicate. The TSICP specifically defines the channel name, transmit and receive frequencies, use of CTCSS, and general parameters for use of the many interoperable channels. For instance, in every VHF radio across the state of Texas that's used for emergency management or response, VCAL 10 should be named the same. Additionally, the transmit and receive frequencies should all be programmed as 155.7525. Carrier squelch, or open squelch, should be programmed for the receive CTCSS, and a tone code of 156.7 should be used for the transmit CTCSS. In this case, VCAL 10 is allowed for use as a calling channel, but not as a tactical channel, as shown in the table. There are also repeated interoperability channels available for use. In most cases, this requires the deployment of a tactical repeater in order to ensure that the channels are available. Tactical repeaters can be requested as a deployable resource through the appropriate emergency management channels. If you remember from Unit 3, repeated channels only work when a repeater is in place. Therefore, simply programming the repeated interoperability channels into your radio does not ensure that interoperability can be established using these channels. Clearly, there are a large number of interoperability channels available for use, and they can be programmed into your radio. The question remains as to whether you must have them all programmed into your radio, especially if you have no immediate access to a tactical repeater. Speaking of having a large number of channels to program into our radios, it is important that agencies and departments plan ahead to determine what groups, zones, channels, and talk groups will be programmed. This is influenced partly by the capabilities of the radios we use as an agency or department. For instance, if the rotary selection knob on a handheld is programmed to select zones or groups, then each zone or group can have any number of channels programmed within. In this case, the programming approach would be limited to a small number of zones based on the number of positions allowed by the selector knob, which is typically 16. On the other hand, an agency could choose to have any number of zones and use the selector knob instead to select channels within the zone. This would limit the number of channels in each zone to 16, but the radio could have as many zones as the agency believes they need. Some radios do not have rotary selector knobs at all. The Kenwood TK5720 mobile radio uses a push button feature to select both zones and channels. In this case, neither the number of zones or the number of channels are limited by radio capabilities. Now, most agencies and jurisdictions use a number of different local channels for different purposes. Adding the full range of interoperable channels into the list can easily double the number of channels that the subscriber must scroll through. In a perfect world, having all interoperability channels accessible in each radio would be ideal. Unfortunately, we commonly find the need to limit the number of channels included. The TSICP identifies short lists that can be programmed as a single zone within a 16-channel limitation. The TSICP identifies short lists that can be programmed as a single zone with a 16-channel limitation. The short list includes the recommended channels that should be programmed at a minimum in every public safety radio. The TSICP provides short lists for each band addressed by licensed interoperability channels. Each shortlist differs in size based on the availability of interoperability channels within that band. Shown here is the shortlist for UHF radios. For 700 MHz frequencies and for 800 MHz frequencies. Thus far, we have talked about the use of a wide variety of channels to support day-to-day operations, emergency response, and planned event management. However, one of the greatest challenges to operability and interoperability is having the ability to manage the massive amount of communications information and resources available to you. To help with this issue, there are a number of supporting documents. First is the ICS 205 form. This form, titled the Incident Radio Communications Plan, is designed to support incident and planned event communications coordination. Functionally, the form allows the incident management team to categorize the use of radio channels and talk groups based on their intended use during a specific incident. The form also allows for the inclusion of technical information, such as frequency and tone, to assist communication experts in better supporting incident or event operations. The ICS 205 can be pre-filled so that templates exist for different types of incidents or events. Radio note cards may be affixed to the radio or distributed with the radio and typically contain the zones, channels, and button configuration of the radio. While these cards are especially beneficial for cache radios that may be distributed on an incident or during an event, they are also beneficial when issuing radio equipment to employees for the first time. Electronic notes, such as notes contained within a spreadsheet or programming software, help you to stay aware of specific programming requirements, uses, and technical information pertaining to each channel or talk group. Field operation guides act as a quick reference for communications information. These guides have been created by the Department of Homeland Security, Texas Office of Statewide Interoperability Coordinator, or SWIC, and the Heart of Texas Council of Governments to support incident and event communications. Local policies and standard operating procedures may also exist to support emergency communications. Some departments or agencies have established standard operating procedures that require the migration of incident communications to interoperability channels in order to reduce traffic load on the primary dispatch channel. The use of interoperability channels in this approach encourages communication between agencies and disciplines responding to the incident. The Regional Standard Operating Procedures and the Regional Interoperable Communications Plan also contain information relating to the system design, resource availability, and best practices to support emergency communications and interoperability. When programming radios or issuing direction to those programming your agency or department radios, it is important to ensure that operability and interoperability are integrated into your approach. One consideration is to include a specific interoperability channel in the same zone or group as your day-to-day channels. This allows access to an interoperability channel without changing zones and allows for the scanning of the channel for situational awareness. For rapidly developing incidents, the inclusion of an interoperability channel in the primary zone or group ensures that the incident management personnel have efficient access for using the channel. This consideration is even more appropriate if a local policy or procedure exists in which a specific channel is defined for use on multi-agency or multi-jurisdictional incidents. Another consideration is the use of common calling channels that are monitored by dispatch. The calling channels serve as a portal to dispatch in which responders from outside of the local area can notify dispatch of needs or issues without having direct access to our local channels. Throughout this unit, we have discussed the programming for interoperability channels, the use of designated short lists to guide programming practices, approaches to integrating operability and interoperability when programming department or agency radios, and identifying a number of documents that support our interoperability efforts. Be sure to complete the activities below in order to unlock Unit 5. In Unit 5, we'll discuss the Regional Communications Standard Operating Procedure and how it affects your agency or department. Until then, stay safe, be aware, and keep up the great work that you do in your community.